Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. My name is Fasih Siddiqui. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and I am a part of the Real World Asset Tokenization Academy, and we've partnered up with the Taif Digital Institute to provide premium blockchain education. It's a much required initiative here in Pakistan, and we're the first ones to work on this. So today we have Dr. Mufti Mohammad Omer Rafique, who is an assistant professor and Sharia advisor, and he's spent a considerable amount of time walking through Islamic legal principles and applying them to the virtual assets ecosystem. So this is not going to be a theoretical conversation. This is going to be a very practical conversation. We're going to be learning from Mufti Mohammad Omer Rafique Saab. And inshallah, it will be a very beneficial session to you all. So we are going to have Dr. Omer also present us with a structured presentation, which he has prepared specifically for this session. And whether you're here from a bank, a fintech, a Sharia board, or simply trying to understand this space, I want you guys to leave with a clearer picture of where Islamic law and digital assets actually meet. So this is what we want to get out of this session. And I'd like Dr. Mufti Mohammad Omer Rafique to give a brief introduction so we can begin.
Okay. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all the participants. And thank you, Fasih. Thank you for having me on board on this topic. And about something which is coming in future, because we all people from the banking industry, actually we should be future focused. So I was telling that in the last 3-4 years I have turned my focus towards the fintech solutions. And my aim, my ambition, my vision is to help people develop the Sharia-compliant fintech solutions. It is because I personally think that the technology has a lot of potential, and if it is guided through the Sharia government principles, it can create far more better and productive Muslim economy for the economy. So I'm a student professor and a researcher by profession as well, and I teach at Zappos University, where I am sitting right now. And apart that, as I told, that I have an advisory and consulting experiences working with some of the banks, and I have with some tokenization institutions. And lately we are doing some model development as well for some organizations who are willing to come in the coming future and develop some tokenization tools. So that's, I think, the brief introduction. And today we shall talk on the virtual assets ecosystem. So Fasih, shall I start, or you will start with the questions?
Yes. So basically, before you start with the presentation, I wanted to set a stage about how this conversation is going to go forward. And before we dive right into virtual assets, I'd like to understand that, can you give us the essential Sharia framework we need to keep in mind through this conversation? Like, what are the core principles to determine whether any financial instrument or transaction is permissible as per Sharia? So could you enlighten us with that?
Okay. So in today's session, inshallah, I'll be focusing on some core principles which should be and followed by all the developers, whether they
Okay.
software development side, they are product compliance side. So I'll be giving some principles, inshallah, in the coming slides.
Okay. So I think you should begin your presentation. And if we have any follow-up questions, if anyone has any questions, you can ask your questions in the chat as well. And I'll do my best to ask any follow-up questions if I feel that there's a need to have clarity on a certain aspect. So Mufti Omer, you're welcome to start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I do encourage the questions even in during the speech and during delivery of the content. So if you have any question regarding the topic, you can just post it on the chat, or you can ask through your mic as well. So I will. I'm available, inshallah, for all these questions. So we will be talking about virtual assets, especially from the lens of Sharia, and Pakistan has been doing very good adaptive work in this context. We shall focus on the Sharia screening and tokenization steps, and then we will have some governance pipeline as well, which steps should be followed. So if we talk about the Web 3.0 and how actually Islam sees it. So the public ledger provides the witnessing, and there is a discussion in Surah Baqarah that talks about ishhad, that talks about the witness of the people. And basically, Islam wants these transactions to be governed by solid and ethical rules, not by unethical rules, not by weak rules, but solid and ethical rules. So each and every transaction, basically, Islam is there to secure the right of both parties. If there are two, let's say buyer and seller, so Islam gives a complete governance system for securing the rights of the buyer as well as the rights of the seller. So if there are three parties, like there is a financial intermediary, or then he has some rights and he has some responsibilities. So Islam, by the virtue of the divine revolution, provides a governance system that is relevant stakeholders in that particular transaction. So one part of that comprehensive framework is the concept of witnessing and ishhad. Islam wants the transaction to be to be
Mufti Omer, I think we're having some trouble hearing you. So if you could try to connect from a different network, that would be great, if that's possible. I also have this presentation with me, so maybe I can share the presentation and he can walk us through it, and I can guide with the presentation as he directs me to. So that's also an option. And yes, Dakat Saab, we'll try that. Mufti Saab is also available and open to share his video. He just messaged me as well that he's trying to reconnect from a different location and a different network. So let's see what happens. Once, and if any problem occurs at this point, then we can go towards my solution.
Okay, inshallah. Thank you, Fasih, for facilitating. I shall reconnect what I was trying to say. So I was discussing the concept of ishhad in Quran, and I wanted to connect that principle with the principle of blockchain and how actually transparency is provided through the decentralized systems. We cannot say actually Islam discussed the blockchain, but actually transparency is what is required and what is well encouraged in the Islamic financial law. So if you are focusing on the blockchain solutions, the transparency is one of the core objectives of Sharia. So if we talk about the virtual assets, this has been a great debate, and I think this debate is now coming to some conclusion in some years that actually tokens and the virtual assets are mal or not. This is a very strong debate among the Sharia scholars, and this debate is actually several hundred years ago, because it's not about tokens that has emerged as a non-tangible property, but there were some non-tangible property even before 600, 700 years ago, because we find in our Islamic fiqh literature that there are some things that are called manfaat, and some of the scholars were of that opinion, even in that time, that manfaat can be considered as a just like as a tangible asset that can be traded as well. So however, if the tokens are considered as mal mutaqawwam, as a mal, it can be tradable. Why? Actually, because it has some utility, it is of some use, it is of some manfa'a. Number two, it is exclusive, it is not owned by everyone. Basically, it is owned by special people. So the ownership concept can be applied to this. For example, the ownership concept cannot be applied to the water that is moving from the rivers and the water in the sea, because basically not a single or special owners are there for these common good things. So because these tokens and these virtual assets can be owned exclusively, therefore it fulfills one of the core requirement of being mal. Number three is value, because people want it and people have a demand, so there is a worth in the market. So that is why tamavul is there. That is the value of that particular non-tangible, non-seeable asset with outside the screen. But because these three things are being fulfilled, therefore, as per the Islamic law, most of the scholars are of this opinion. Especially when we are going to discuss about the tokens that are backed by real assets. Actually, almost all the scholars are of the opinion that they are considered as mal. Uh, Now, if we talk about virtual assets, actually there are several kinds, and why they can be considered as an asset. If you talk about Sharia perspective as well, it serves as a medium of exchange. So now people are paying through this, people are getting their payments through these, especially the stable coins. If you talk about USDT, so even some of the governments may be working on these stable coins. So actually, medium of exchange, it is serving as a medium of exchange. Number two, they are asset. One of the core part that should be, and this is from Sharia perspective, it's very important that these virtual assets should be backed by real assets. So those virtual assets which are not backed by the real assets, as far as their credibility is concerned, and as far as their tamavul, being mal, being tradable asset is concerned, is something which is still debatable. But even many of the scholars are of the opinion that these non-asset backed virtual assets can also be considered assets. However, if we focus on the virtual assets backed by real assets, actually they are Sharia compliant assets. So into the most of the scholars, uh, what about protocol value? Because there is a chain of coins, and actually, as I discussed about the transparency, so this is also something which actually fulfills the objectives and supports the objectives of Sharia. So that was the initial discussion. As I have discussed that there are virtual assets backed by the real assets. We need to understand actually how it is backed, because I was working with some of the US clients trying to develop these backed assets. So tokenization maps a physical asset to a digital instrument. Now, how it maps, it is very important. It's not only just saying that actually we have this much asset. We need to get this mapping and this pegging concept to be present in reality. So there is a Sharia gap that token must represent a direct legal or beneficial interest, not a synthetic shadow. Because, for example, there are meme coins as well. So meme coins are something which should not be considered as Sharia compliant. And as far as the real world backed, real assets backed virtual assets or tokens are concerned, they should be considered as Sharia compliant. So actually, we cannot say about each and every coin or each and every token that it is compliant or not compliant. We need to actually check the process of mapping and pegging of these physical assets with these digital instruments. So one of the core part in auditing and in developing that is developing that particular system of pegging and connection of the real world asset to the digital world. As far as the Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan is doing a good job in because there was a strict prohibition in Circular 3 by State Bank that it was not allowed, for example, to the scheduled banks to work or to open an account for these organizations who deal in virtual assets. Then after in 2025 there was a PVARA, and I think that most of the participants actually know about the details. So in 2025, some I would say revolutionary work was done through this PVARA authority, and after that actually it was allowed for the scheduled banks to open accounts for those who are working in these assets. So actually this is a process that is that's not yet complete, and a lot to be done, but actually we need to understand the direction of the regulator and direction of the government, how they are going to use these as tokens and assets. And if we talk about the bigger picture, actually we need to understand what US government or the Western governments are trying to do or achieve in the coming future. Actually in many of the cases, because many of the other developing nations normally follow the other tech savvy governments like Singapore. So if we are able to understand what is happening in Singapore, I think we would able to understand what will happen in Pakistan after 10 to 20 years. So regulatory perspective, in there is the Virtual Assets Ordinance 2025 is something very new and very revolutionary. But we need to actually discuss, especially from Sharia perspective and Sharia governance perspective, on these aspect of on these regulation and regulated authorities, and that is, I think, the core topic of today's session. So I shall not be going towards what actually ordinance says, but I think we need to read the ordinance, especially each and every person who is involved in these virtual assets business, either he's a buyer or seller. So PVARA mandates a lot of things. I think we shall focus on the Sharia part. As far as the Sharia part is concerned, I think the 2027 deadline of going towards a complete Islamic finance economy, I think actually if this is the real intention, and it should be the real intention of the people living in Pakistan, because the person who actually discussed the Islamic finance first was back in 1948, just when we conquered the space, the ideology, and when we so because everything was done based on some ideology. One core part of the ideology was to have a sovereign, compliant, and prosperous economy and financial system. So after 75 years, I think the progress is quite slow, but as the real objectives are already set, we need to actually focus on that. So if we talk about the virtual assets and what is happening through these virtual assets and what will happen in the economy in the coming years, I think the real objectives or achieving these objectives will become easier. Why? It is, I think, because many a times when we talk about the core Islamic banking operations, there are many excuses about the system, about the regulator, about the industry, about the system, the whole capitalist system that has been working since centuries. But I think when we have the liberty and authority of developing the system, and many of the people are developing their own tokens, and they have pegged it to some real world assets, the economy becomes realistic, asset backed, asset based, which is basically the core objective of Sharia, because if the financial system is based on derivatives and the selling of receivables, it burst like a bubble. For example, what happened in 2008. So what Islam ensures that Islam doesn't ensures about a business, if it is following the Sharia compliance rule, that it will not go into a loss. This is not the case, never. Because whenever there is an economy, there some people will be benefiting, some people may be not benefiting as much. So it's not about having a huge profit, it's not about having a good margins, it is about following the principles. So if we have clear guidelines and we follow these principles, for example, in the case that if we talk about the tokenization of real estate, because real estate is something which can easily be tokenized. So let's take the example of fractional ownership of a commercial property. So it's a huge property, maybe a mall like a Dolmen Mall or somewhat, and or like it is a 50 million. It should, I think it's 50 million uh, building, and it is fractionalized into 5,000 or 50,000 tokens. Then actually these tokens have a real value. A, they each and every token is generating a profit through the rental income. B, so there is the capital gain as well as the monthly or yearly dividends. So actually we can program the whole system through smart contracts logic, and actually by spending very low on the operational features, we can get a system through which a miniature or a small investor can invest in real estate and get the returns. It is actually happening in many of the places like stake.com. It was working in the Emirates, UAE, and uh, some other platforms as well, like DG State is doing in Karachi, or some other platforms are already working, like Group is trying to do in Canada, etc. So it is something very easily doable. So apart from real estate tokenization, actually there are some more options available. Like we can talk about tokenizing of businesses, tokenizing of agricultural lands, tokenizing of the small medium enterprises. Uh, then actually it needs some operational and auditing perspective or auditing details as well. However, all these things are possible. So what do you think about gold backed tokens? There are already tokens available who are backed by gold. But if we talk from Sharia perspective, we need to understand that gold is a ribavi item, and the exchange, if we are exchanging the gold with the gold, or the token that is representing the gold, in essence, actually it should be exchanged in hand to hand. Now, when we talk about hand to hand, actually tokens are not taken into hands, but they are taken into the accounts. So the governance system that actually will allow the gold backed tokens will have to enable the real time position in the accounts. So one is to one physical allocation and verified vault should be there, and we are not talking about the fractional reserve, we are talking about the real gold. And some digital certificate should be there in order to prove that the person has a constructive possession over the gold which is already stored in some vaults. So I will take 5 more minutes,
Officer,
and yes, if you have any question,
uh,
yes, please.
there are a few questions in the chat right now. If you'd like to continue for 5 minutes, like you said, then we could formally take questions as well in the middle. So we could do that.
I think we need to understand the SPV structure, and let's talk about the steps. If you are going towards the real world assets tokenization, one of the first step is have business screening of the assets. Number two, actually, we need to check about if this is more about the business and the pool. The pool should have ratios, and these ratios should be Sharia compliant. And these are the minimum limits. And the better is that conventional debts should be 0%. However, it is allowed to be less than. It is actually not allowed to be 33%. It is tolerated to be less than 33%. So same goes with some other. Like 5% income from conventional debt. Step three is that we need to actually do a process of operational screening that requires the purity of origin, and there are several administrative things like KYC and travel rules should be checked, and we should ensure that no impermissible income or the person having an impermissible business should enter into the pool. We can talk about a minute or two about these smart contracts, and this is something very new that is coming to the Sharia scholars, and they need to actually understand how smart contracts work, because smart contract is something is just like an agreement or a written contract. In the era of in the space of the tokens and coins, the programmed economy, smart contracts are essential. So automated execution of a Sharia agreement, we need to actually understand how it works. We need to check the basic foundations are being met or not, like having the basic requirements of a contract act, having how someone, that is the price, is set, how the amana concept, trust concept is fulfilled. What should be removed from the system, or what should be considered as very important and critical? First of all, riba. Any virtual asset going towards riba, going towards fixed returns on investments and staking, that becomes usury, and that is why actually we are encouraging this system, that we should refrain from it. Number two, there can be some gharar as well. Like for example, there are some tokens which has no value whatsoever behind it, or the terms and conditions of the whole system are vague, or there are some hidden controls. So these things are not tolerable in the Sharia governance system. Similarly, if for example people are using these coins for some gambling, etc., this is also a red flag. Now I think what Sharia people should do, Sharia people and the Sharia board, I think any virtual asset system should have a strong Sharia board, at least a person or two in that board. So what they should do, I think the governance system should go like this, that there should be some screening and white paper regarding that developed system, the product structuring. So it should be pre-issuance. After that, I think there should be a smart audit. It should actually check the codes against the fiqh rules. Actually, it is fulfilling it or not. And I was doing this kind of audit, and it's not really easy to understand. So many a times you need to have a software developer with you in order. He will translate that code to you, and you will then understand the fiqh rules are being applied or not. So point number three is annual review. Annual review should be done. This is a periodic review. And purification. If there is any unintentional haram income has came into the pool, we need to purify it. I think the last part I should talk about is this: the scholar developer bridge. The problem is scholars are not developers, and developers are not scholars. So what I suggest in a minute or two, that first of all, I think we should have a scholar on board from the very inception of the idea. When we are incepting the idea, or developing the system, or the whole, I think in the design of the system there should be a input of these scholars, not only about vetting of it. It is because when you design initially Sharia compliant, it becomes easier to run it and to make it compliant after the execution and in the periodic as well. However, if the scholar is not on board from the inception stage, at the end scholars have many different observations which cannot be embedded into the developed system. So one. Two, I think the scholars need to understand the blockchain economy, how it works, and there are very few scholars available in the market who actually can understand the details. And three is what I basically started from: the intentions. The intentions of all the developers should be that we are here to develop a compliant, prosperous and productive economy for the society. I think this is from my side, and I want the Fasih, if you can go towards the question answers, please.
Yes, sure. So, thank you so much for the wonderful session. So, Imran has asked a question that how do you see Islamic banks' reservation or cautious approach opening the CMA accounts of virtual asset service providers like Binance? Because the concern is that these exchanges are dealing in futures and derivative contracts. So, if an Islamic bank, for example, is to open a client money account for banks like for exchanges like these that offer derivative services, so do you think the Sharia perspective on that would be in favor of that, or should the bank approach this more cautiously?
I think the process of an Islamic bank regarding opening the accounts of those and having a screen and filter on it is very commendable. However, I think if the same process is being used, like any of the virtual assets system dealing in derivatives, or like the selling derivatives of these tokens, or then actually it is not compliant. However, if the organization is maybe dealing in the tokens backed by real assets, and they are not having their income from selling the debts, then basically their income is allowed, and in that case I don't think that any of the Sharia board may have a reservation on it.
Okay. So just to clarify, you're saying that digital tokens like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're not backed by real assets. So there is no clear consensus right now on those assets. But when you talk about real world asset tokenization and assets backed by property or gold, for example, so there is no argument for those assets being non-Sharia compliant. They're Sharia compliant in every case. Obviously, when the underlying asset is halal itself.
And there are some guidelines as well that should be followed. However, the core system is okay.
Okay. Okay. So Basim has asked that, do you think the model where developers give a fixed monthly income on an asset that is not built up is Sharia compliant and that is guaranteed by them? Some called it a deferred discount, such as off-plan properties. So if a developer of a token is offering you guaranteed return on a real world asset, so how do you see that problem?
I think these virtual assets should be directly and strongly connected with the real world assets. The tokens should be connected with the real world assets. So if we talk about real world assets, I am not able to find an asset which guarantees the return, because even if you talk about gold, it appreciates almost in 99% cases, but the possibility and probability of going down is already there. So actually guaranteeing is the problem. However, in many of the cases it doesn't happen that it goes in loss. So the cautious system should be developed for giving the returns, and actually guaranteeing is a problem.
Okay. So we have another question from Ahmed, who's asking that, do we have any information on virtual assets of other regulatory frameworks in other Muslim countries? Is there any guidance on other countries such as Saudi Arab or Dubai, for example, or UAE, for example, on the governance and regulatory regimes of virtual assets? Can you shed some light on that?
As far as I know, the regulatory frameworks have been developed like in Dubai and some other countries, and some kind of document is also issued by the SEMA, that is the Central Bank of Saudi Arabia. But actually, when we talk about the Sharia governance of it, and like the a document to be issued by the Sharia committees of these central banks, so I have not seen a document issued by them. However, there are a lot of documents and researches being issued by Sharia scholars in their personal capacities, and even some organizations and boards have done these developed some filters and guidelines. However, as a regulation, I have not been able to see that, and in coming future, I think it will come in any case.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Perfect. So another question is that can we apply tokenization on intangible assets such as intellectual property or computer software? So I think that's a good question, and we'd like your input on that.
That's a very good question, I think. And since basically we need to understand the all the other people from the outside the software industry, they think very differently, and the people in the software development industry, they think very differently. So as the economy is actually taken by these non-tangible and like software developers, so actually we cannot say that software is not mal, and these non-tangible assets, provided they follow the rulings, as for example some of the guidelines I have shared, like ownership requirement and consideration and position, etc. So if these things are to be considered, in that case these non-tangible assets can be considered just like as real world assets, and in that case they can be tokenized as well. However, uh, strict guidelines regarding actually how it will work, and some research needs to be done regarding the position, etc. Because actually when I sell the same software to two-person, it becomes a question that was that same or different, because the code was same. So actually some research should be done. However, it can be considered as tangible assets, same as tangible assets.
Okay. So generally it's going to be allowed, but there are going to be some guidelines that you'll have to follow in that scenario. Okay, perfect. So we have another question from Mr. Sadakat Khan. Is that who will establish the SPV and manage accounting record of those assets and the income collection and its distribution? So how would the smart contracts and Sharia structure look like for that transaction?
I think I explained a bit in the steps, but it needs to be understood by the developers of the system. The developers of the system need to understand the details. So there are actually three parties: the investor, the investee, and in between them is the system, the blockchain based system, the tokenization system, and they normally are the biggest stakeholders in the Sharia compliance of the tokens. So like you can take the example of a bank, the depositor and the customer, the debtor, basically they don't know a lot about the system. They just invest their money and get their money. The system is to be run and checked and audited. It is the whole responsibility of the Islamic bank. Similarly, in that case, creating an SPV, the maintaining the audits, and filtering the income coming inside the pool, and the smart contracts being run should run as per the FIT rulings. All these responsibilities lie on the on the system, the system that is giving the technology solution, and they can charge for it because they are giving a service to the investor and investee.
Okay. Okay. So what about the actual rental income after deduction of SPV management expenses? Would that be shared with the token holders, or the distribution would be linked to the interbank offer rates?
Oh, that is a very good operational question. What
Hmm.
actually should be done, that it should not be capped by the interbank offering rates, because this has been a point of debate that even the Islamic banks' returns are capped or floored by the benchmarks. If because we have a kind of liberty here in this system, I think it should not be benched like that. However, I am not of the opinion that it should be have extreme liberty, because the regulators should be there focusing on the system owners, and they should be able to regulate it somehow, because there is an opportunity of doing zulm with the investors or with the investee. So in that case, there should be some system. However, as far as the interest rate or the monetary policy is issued, there should be some different benchmarks for it to be that should be followed.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Um, can you please, Farha Aslam has asked, can you please explain the Sharia position on stablecoin reserve model, including the beneficial ownership of reserves, the treatment of any reserve profit or wakil fee, and the key wakala agreement conditions needed to keep reserves Sharia compliant and available for redemption?
Where is this question? This question is quite heavy. It looks like a PhD research question.
Okay, okay. So if you just go to the lower bar, there's a Q&A part. There's a
Yes,
Q&A button that you can press.
I have opened that webinar chat. Okay, Q&A button.
Yeah.
In this Q&A button, you are saying Firman.
Farha Aslam. So it's the sixth last comment or question.
Farah Aslam, apologies. Farah Aslam said apologies. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you please
As far
explain? Yeah.
okay. Explain Sharia position on stable coin reserve model, including beneficial ownership of reserve. However, first of all, stable coins are compliant and can be made compliant. Again, not every stable coin is compliant. The stable coin that follows the basic rules and guidelines is compliant. One. Two, beneficial ownership of reserve. Yes, actually, the token holders are the beneficial owners of the reserves, treatment of any reserve profit or wakil fee, and key wakala agreement condition needed to keep reserve Sharia compliant available for the redemption. Yes, for example, those who are providing the custodian services for the tokens, they can charge fee for it. And as far as the redemption is concerned, redemption basically when there is no laborious work being required in the redemption of the process. I am not of the opinion that a specific redemption fee should be charged. However, if the system is like redemption requires a lot of movement and a lot of software requirements, in that case, it can be charged.
Okay. So we have a few other questions as well. One question, Abdullah Tawkir has asked that question in the comment section, in the chat section. So he's asked that if we consider digital tokens as mal in themselves, why do they have to be backed by real world assets?
Abdullah, we need to understand two different levels of being mal. First of all, why we are considering these tokens to be mal. One argument or one detailed discussion on this is actually the tokens are the representation of the real mal. So basically, we are allowing to deal in tokens. In other words, we are allowing to deal in the real asset that is kept in some vault. So basically, the tokens are representing the real mal. Argument one. The different argument, the argument two, that some of the scholars, like, they are of the opinion, and there are details about it, that even if that token is launched by a strong system, follows the guidelines, and have no real assets backed for the tokens, even in that case they can be considered as mal. So in part 2, actually, there is no need of having real world assets backing. However, the system should be strong, and there are some detailed guidelines as well. So to me, for example, just to give my opinion, I don't give my opinions on many things. However, I personally think both of these things can be considered as mal.
Okay. Okay. So I think we have crossed the 3 p.m. timestamp. So I think we should conclude this session. If there are a few questions left, so I think we can just give it 1 or 2 minutes and quickly answer these questions. So there's a question that how can we be benefiting from tokenization in Waqf Ijara forward lease? So I think that's the last question we're going to be able to take.
This question actually requires a detailed model to be described, and
Okay.
this tokenization based on WAF. I am not able to discuss the operational details of that process. However, I would like to mention that WAF is a very robust, comprehensive, productive, and poor friendly, friendly for the poor people concept. And if it is embedded in the tokenization, through tokenization, I think that many of the SMEs can benefit, and many of the undeveloped or underserved economies or society can be served through it. So I personally am doing a research on it, and I would like, from this platform as well, that I would like the respondents to, if they are able to get the link, and I'll share the link, and they can give their opinions on related to that research as well.
Okay. So you're sending that link in the chat right now?
Yes, I'm sending it in the chat.
Okay. So just
If you
one
have
last comment from.
yes,
Yes. Sorry.
yes, please.
Yes.
No,
So one
I'm saying
last
that you may continue.
question. Okay. Okay. So one last question from my side is that for the people watching this today, many people are from banks or from fintech organizations or students of Islamic finance. So what do you think is one concrete step that these people can take to engage with this topic seriously? And what do you think the right step is for them to get to learn more about Islamic finance and how and its convergence with virtual assets in greater detail? So, what would be your advice?
Okay, so my advice, basically, because they are different, the audience is different, and however, many a times the tech savvy level of many of the people are same, because many people working for 20 years, maybe they not be able to understand technology as like a person who has just started his career. So I think we should try to learn about technology as much as possible. Even for the Sharia scholars as well, they should know about technology, because many any field is going through that technological revolution. As far as the tokenization is concerned, I think, if when you come across about any organization offering this, go and check the flow chart, and spend your 15 to 20 minutes on that flow chart in order to understand how the transactions are moving, and from one place to another. And it will basically make you understand the concept, and the transactions. And from that, actually, if you have basic knowledge of Islamic finance, you will be able to get the non-compliances observations from that flowchart.
Okay. Okay.
I have shared the link in the chat, and I would like to request all the participants to participate in this research as well. It is related to tokenization, and this may be an input from your side.
Okay, perfect. You all are recommended to, provide your input on this. And thank you so much, Dr. Omer. This has been a wonderful session, and I'm sure all of us got to learn a lot more about the convergence of virtual assets and Islamic finance. So these were not easy areas to talk about, and we appreciate the fact that you were so clear and honest about them. And engaging a scholar of your caliber is really important for the people working in this ecosystem to really understand how the Sharia governance framework for virtual assets is. So I'd also like to thank the Real World Asset Tokenization Academy for hosting this event in partnership with Dive Digital Institute. And we'd also like to thank One Block Technologies, which is a blockchain advisory firm. So if any of you would like to get any advice on what types of product to structure, whether that's to apply for a sandbox or to develop an entirely new investment class. So One Block Technology is there to help you with that, and you guys could reach out to them. And thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Dr. Mufti, Omer, if you'd like to add a few comments before we leave.
Thank you, all the organizers. Thank you, Fasih. Thank you, all the participants to be here. And I think having these kind of session as much as possible will basically pave the path for us to get our hands and grip on the topic.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Mufti Mohammad. Omer Rafique was there with us. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Take care and Allah Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.